Hello and welcome to Rise of the Data Cloud. Today's episode features an interview with Tamás Földi, co-founder and CEO of Starschema. Tamás has previously been a white hat hacker and professional consultant for Fortune 500 clients. In this episode, Tamás talks about the pandemic-accelerated digitization, distributing data, centralizing data, and much more. So please enjoy this interview between Tamás Földi and your host, Steve Ham.
Tamás, it's so great to have you on the podcast today. I'm just fascinated with your company and what you're doing with technology. Many of our listeners probably aren't familiar with Starschema, so it'd be great if you would start by describing the company. When and why did you and your partner start it, and what are the main dimensions of the business now?
So we help organizations derive value from their data and analytics technology investment. With different words, we are a technology consulting firm. I started this company like 14 years ago, and we started as a relatively boring company doing a lot of Oracle, SQL development, really boring traditional data warehousing. But to be honest, we just realized that we are going to die doing the same stuff over and over. So we decided to focus on emerging technologies because we wanted to do something different. We want to be unique and also doing things what others are not focusing for. And that's where we started to focus on cloud, on open source data integrations. And that really helped us to work with the best partners and with the best clients. Given said, we are niched on the data and analytics. So that's the only thing what we are doing, just data and analytics. And also in the data and analytics space, we are exclusively working for these cool emerging technologies, what we believe that are the best at this point and will be the technology of the future.
That's great. Now, people can probably guess from your accent that you're not from the United States or the UK. Now, you're from Hungary, and the whole company started in Hungary. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, it must be very challenging to start a company in Hungary and make it a global company.
Yes, indeed. Coming from Hungary has its own disadvantages. So using my Hungarian language, I don't think that I can close a lot of deals or I can help a lot of companies. But also in the same time, we have like great education and extremely great people, a huge talent pool. And also in the same time, having ambitions and having vision is not necessarily related to where you are. If you are focusing on what do you want to achieve, in our case, again, we want to help companies to make the best decision on what technologies, what they are using. We are helping them to be successful with Snowflake, for instance. And if that's your drive, then and putting the effort to it, then it's just a question of time when you are going to reach your customers and when you are reaching your goals. So it wasn't necessarily an issue for us. Actually, it's way easier than I thought to work with these Fortune 10 companies. But again, for that, you have to find your niche.
So what's your role in the company? I mean, you've been there for all 14 years and you have a leadership role, but you're in the United States now, I understand.
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and the CEO, but if you check any of my biography or my LinkedIn profile, I used to call myself as a CTO because I just like the title better. I started as a data engineer, and I still consider myself as a data engineer, even if my company did grow to more than 200 people, and we have offices in, East Coast, West Coast, in addition to Hungary. But again, the goal was always, to live up our aspiration and work with the best companies, but also in the same time, being a data engineer, I want to make sure that we are enjoying what we are doing. And being a data engineer or being an IT programmer, I wanted to create a company which will also be good for my employees who are also fellow data engineers.
This episode is brought to you by Snowflake. Join 50,000 of your peers at Snowflake's annual global user conference, Snowflake Summit, this June 8th through 10th. Hear from Snowflake customers, industry thought leaders, and more about how they bring data together now with the Data Cloud. Learn more and register at snowflake.com/summit.
Now, here we're talking at a time when the world is starting to emerge from the COVID-19 crisis. And I know that your company's played an important role in that, but we'll get a bit to that later. But if you could talk kind of more generally, what are you teed up to do as the world hopefully roars back economically and socially from this disaster?
Yes, data and analytics was already a hot area. And during the pandemic, each and every company started to accelerate their digitalization efforts. And digitalization means more data, and more data means more work. Many companies realized that their plans and strategies were fragmented and are investing in getting the house in order. Doing so will enable them to better compete and thrive, but many, while they know where they want to go, aren't sure how to best to get there. More companies will turn to third parties like us to help with the technical implication need for this digital transformation. And again, we have a track record on doing just this and already seeing great demand.
Let's go and talk about the Starschema COVID-19 data set. When and why did you decide to create the Starschema COVID-19 data set? And what is it? People need that basic knowledge to get going.
Yes. So the whole story started that two of my friends and community members of Tableau called me in the beginning of the pandemic and told me that they need some data engineering help to set up the Tableau Software's COVID data hub. So Tableau Softwares wanted to create easily accessible dashboards where you can track all these cases around the globe. And they asked our help to make it more robust. And since we did a lot of work with the Tableau community and helped their Tableau Foundation in the past, we immediately say yes. But during that process, I just realized that sharing the data and creating the data for their dashboards, like for Salesforce itself, was really a painful exercise. And I thought that there should be a better way to distribute this data with the customers and to distribute it for everyone who needs to react to this crisis in the quickest way possible. And that was the point where I called a couple of my friends at Snowflake and asked, hey guys, do you want to have a COVID-19 data hub, or do you want to have the data and share it through your data marketplace? Because that's that's the best use case I can imagine for you. We can make sure that all the data will be there in a cleansed and ready to use format, and all of your customers can access with a single click. So that's how we started. And I would say within a week, using open source technologies, we set it up a nice GitHub repository with all the source codes, with all the integration. And within a few days, we were able to distribute this data to hundreds of Snowflake customers. And it was quite a ride. It's currently the Starschema COVID-19 datasets collates a range of data sources, including the epidemiological data like morbidity and mortality from the Johns Hopkins University or the World Health Organization and other like smaller national health authorities. We have testing data from the CDC. We have hospitalization information, including projected and actual values. Recently, we added the vaccination data via also the Johns Hopkins University and our Verdin data, which is also an open data provider. And there are a lot of other data sets as well, such as mobility data sets, like seeing how the commute times and people's mobility changed over time, as well as other useful data sets for giving context like demographical data, ICU bed capacity, everything what you need to build up your own COVID-related dashboards for your own COVID-related use cases inside your organization. So that's how it started, and that's what we are having. And we have a lot of inquiries and data requests from customers who want to add additional data sources. And we try to be as flexible and as possible to make sure that if you have any needs which might be useful for other clients as well, we are trying to integrate it back if we can. And also, because this is an open source project, there are other random people over the internet from the Snowflake community who are contributing to this marketplace. So that's really a collaborative effort.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, so why is it so important to have all this data in one place and shareable? And what are some of the more coolest things that the customers are doing with it?
So the reason why it's great to have everything in a single place is because it makes it extremely easy to reuse it inside your own organization. You don't have to spend time hunting for different data sets to find out what's reliable and what's not. And again, I would also emphasize the importance of the community here. If you do it once and can be reused by many, and you can just collect this the community knowledge in a single place, it will accelerate the response by these organizations because we don't have to do individually the same tasks over and over. And also another advantage is have everything in one place, that you can have a really organized, easy to join data set, which are using the same business keys. So it's really, which makes it really easy to match the different data sources and join them together, blend them together, and use it to your own data set. So it saves a lot of time and also helps you to react quicker. Regarding use cases, we see three different waves of use cases. The first wave of use cases was concerned with responding to peaks and steep trajectories, and that was really related to the beginning of the pandemic. Like, for instance, a defense contractor who has their offices just around the street, just opposite on the street from our offices, has used our data to prioritize various facilities for evacuation of personnel, which means that I used to believe, I don't know if it's true or not, but our work could impact actual human lives. So it was used to prioritize who and how should be evacuated, which is, again, was a relatively interesting use case. But again, in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty. The only thing which was sure is about the mortality and the number of cases. After a couple of months or a couple of weeks, maybe, there was a second wave of use cases which were mainly focused on joining our COVID-19 data set with external data, such as mobility indicators as identified from cell phone localization data. So several companies from the consumer retail sector have used our data set in this way. One example, we have a relatively large music label as the customer, and they realized that the streaming music consumption habits are drastically changed. People used to listen music in urban areas during the commute times, during commuting. And since commuting went back to zero practically, all of their existing business models were impacted. And using the data, what is the situation in these areas, how the virus is spreading, how people are commuting, what's the mobility, people moving, are they staying at home, are they not staying at home, what's the ratio between essential workers who are still traveling and not. These kind of analyses were quite frequently produced in that second era. The third, which is, I would say, the current wave, in this time, I would say that the main focus of the use cases are predicting policy changes and the risk in view of vaccination efforts. Again, many companies are using the Starschema COVID-19 dataset through the marketplace to determine when it's safe to reopen particular facilities, when to begin the transition back to the office, and when consumer demand for in-person services is likely to rise again. One example, like Capital One, who are using to forecast and plan response scenarios for its workforce and its customers. And also, especially in Europe, some governments also aligns their policy changes to the number of vaccinated people in their country or the percentage of vaccinated people. So keeping companies' eyes on these numbers and percentages are extremely important to plan when they can open what kind of facilities in their businesses.
Yeah, excellent explanation of those three waves of using the data set. Did the company do a lot of data set creation before this, or did this kind of the COVID crisis give rise to a new area for you to focus on and exploit?
No, we are not we are a consultation company. So this was the first effort, actually not the last. Since then, we made additional data sets available. Yeah. We found that this is the best way. How can we help to other communities, other companies? And when there is a crisis, you should think about how could you help the most for others. And that's what was the most straightforward and the most obvious way to try to help others. No, this is an extremely new area for us. So we started to add additional data sets to the marketplace because of two things. The first, it's extremely easy to use the marketplace. It's a pleasure to share data sources with others. And also on the other hand, we used so many open source and free projects in the past. And whenever we have a chance to make other companies or people's life easier, we just have to take that opportunity. And again, the data marketplace is just an obvious way to do that.
Yeah. And just to make it clear for the listeners, it was Snowflake's data marketplace that basically hosts this data set, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah. And now I understand that you created a couple of technologies along the line here. The starter dashboard and the case trajectory status visualization. That's a mouthful. Talk about those. What are those and how are they used?
So the case trajectory status visualization was just an example how to use this Snowflake data set from XML tools such as Tableau dashboard. It was really meant for an example because we still believe that the biggest effect of this data when it's joined with the customer's own enterprise data. So looking to purely on external data, it's not going to give you any new insights. The value of the marketplace is that you have your internal enterprise data sets from your ERP, from your CRM, from everywhere of your organization. And that's the piece what you need to complete with the additional information to get more precise insights. Yes, the dashboard was really just to show some of the capabilities, but what concerns customers is how the pandemic is going to affect their businesses. So for this, integrating with their own data pipelines is just important. Yeah.
Just to make sure I understand correctly. So you're saying the data marketplace made it possible for them to easily integrate external data with their own internal data and then analyze it from there.
Yes, the marketplace makes this more convenient than any other solution on the market. So it brings in the entire data set with a single click, actually with 2 clicks, but still.
Yeah. Hey, you've made it sound pretty easy, but were there challenges, technological challenges or business challenges that emerged when you were doing this data set that could be instructive to the listeners?
So obviously the biggest challenge was the data cleansing and the data quality issues, because most of these data sets were put together by volunteers from different projects who use Google Sheets and other really manual entry forms to collect the data. And especially in the beginning, it was a huge mess. It wasn't designed for computers to work with that data set. So we spent a lot of time to cleanse the data, to add I can talk about that later, but the biggest challenge itself is the change of the data set's availability. So in the beginning, Johns Hopkins was the primary source of case information, and everybody used their data sets. And then eventually they decided to forbid to use their data sets for profit usage. So many of the Snowflake customers were not able to use the Johns Hopkins University data sets, which means in that case, we had to find alternative sources as much as reliable as the Johns Hopkins University. So options were like using the World Health Organization data sets, which again, in last year, they published their numbers every day in a PDF format. So we had to use some OCR technologies to parse their PDFs and get the numbers out of it, because purely saying there were like no other way to get those numbers for companies who wants to use it for profit purposes. Also, another example that the biggest and the most reliable data provider called COVID Tracking Project was also stopped in early March. And in that case, we have to reach out many customers. We had to write a couple of articles and blog posts. How can they do the migration from one data set to another? Which led to one conclusion on our side. So whenever you're doing a community project or whenever you're doing any kind of project, being consistent and staying until the really end of it is extremely important.
Hey, this was a tremendous project which has had tremendous positive impact on companies and clients and all sorts of people. What are the most important lessons that you have learned for your companies about data set development and provisioning that's enriching the way you approach the world?
Some of them I started to mention in the previous question. So number one, you have to stay consistent and support your project and never abandon them. For us, it was an extremely hard thing to keep up with all these other projects and do the changes. So what I learned that I shouldn't do it what others are doing. And if we decided to support something, we should support until the end, till the really end. We also learned that the data marketplace is an extremely easy to use system to share data. And that's, as I mentioned, the best on the market. And it's also encouraged us to invest more to provide data sets to others and not just limit ourselves to the COVID-19. And also asserting what I learned, that the whole concept, the whole data marketplace concept is not just applicable for customers and like across the customers and between data providers and customers. The same concept, like publishing your data inside an organization, provides a huge value as well. So we also started to encourage our own clients to use Snowflake to build up internal data exchange, internal data marketplace, where the different functions and divisions can exchange data in a really sophisticated way.
Hey, I want to backtrack a little bit now and talk about the relationship between Starschema and Snowflake. When did you first get involved with Snowflake, and what's the nature of the involvement?
Yeah, so we're Snowflake partners since a couple of years, and we truly believe in the Snowflake technology because that's the only technology which does the separation of storage and computation in a really elegant way. And I had the pleasure to spend some time in the Snowflake New York office and had some discussions with some of the VPs and CTOs and product managers there. And I really like the vision what Snowflake has, and I really like the engineering and the ease of useness of this system. And I do believe that the future is SQL, and for that, Snowflake is one of our strategic partners. We are also having a few Fortune 10 clients who rely on Snowflake, and they are quite satisfied with it. So they are as much of a fans as us. So I think, that's how it started.
Yeah. So let's, I wanted to switch speeds here, and let's look into the future some more. What are the major data analysis trends that you see developing over the next year or so?
In two big trends and two big changes. The first, that it's more like a hope that all these Java-based Hadoop, Spark, and these kind of computation systems should just disappear or at least transform into something like the data cloud. The challenge with that systems is that they were not designed from scratch to be cloud native.
Yeah.
I truly believe that you can't create a great computation engine if you are using Java system. And I also believe that you can create a great analytic engine if you are not designed from day one to SQL. So I'm sure that just in like 10 years ago, SQL is getting stronger and stronger day by day, and Snowflake will be one of the winners from this trend. On the other hand, what is, I think, more interesting is that I believe personally that in the next 5 years, augmented analytics will be a big thing. So right now, many companies are having a lot of data. They have great reports and great dashboards. But what the end of the day analysts are doing, just look for anomalies, looks for trends and trying to understand what really happens. By using machine learning, like easy statistical algorithms, I'm not even talking AI, but using basic statistical algorithms, you can easily tell not just what is in your database, but you can find out what you have to look at, or you can answer a question why this really happened. And I truly believe that that trend, augmented analytics, explaining your data, asking root cause analysis, or just ask for AI-generated insights to see where you need to look at your data, that's going to be the future. So if I want to invest my money, then I definitely would buy into an augmented analytics company for sure.
How do you see data management and data analytics impacting business, government, society, healthcare, whatever, the whole thing?
In 5 years, what I would expect from leading companies that they would operate their companies from different cockpits and dashboards, and everything will be really centralized around data. As a first step, everything needs to be in the cloud and everything needs to be centralized. All the data values and the data assets has to be in a single location. Second, all these companies have to get the context and they need to leverage the knowledge from others using external data to improve or complete their own data sets. I think that will be really important. And I already see the trends that we are helping many pharmaceutical companies, for instance, to create more precise data science models by leveraging more precise external data sets. But getting the data and getting the reports is just the first step. What I would think the future would be that these cockpits will be giving advice to analysts and executives and decision makers, like where they need to focus and what actions do they have to take. And why humans will be always in the center, more and more of these exploratory will be augmented to AI. And the most important part is, again, when you are making decisions based on the data, you have to have a strong collaboration around it. So collaborative capabilities, especially after COVID, where we are never going to back to the office as we did before. I don't believe that it's going to happen in the next 5 years. Yeah. So finding out how can you make a collaboration asynchronously using this huge centralized data asset, and how you can keep track all of the decisions what you made and find the impact of what you are doing without leaving that cockpit. I think that's where all these products should go and will go in the future.
Right. But I really love your accent. And when we talked before, you described your accent as terrible. And there are moments when it's hard to understand. But then you called it your superpower. What did you mean by that?
As I mentioned, I came from the bottom and I never really learned English in a formal way. So my accent really helps me to remember where I came from. But also at the same time, fortunately, my kids had the privilege to start their schools in the US. So at least they can also make some fun from me. My accents, they always try to correct me. But, what I'm telling to them, two things. The first that you have to be that guy, but no matter how strong his accent is, you will listen to him. That's
Right.
number one. And the second is that even if my English is as is, but my C++, my Python languages, and even SQL languages, I way better than anyone else's. So it's cool. Also, because of my accent, when I'm talking about complex topics, I just noticed that people are listening more carefully.
You know, one of the things I've learned over the past year, and I think Zoom is really part of it, is that in a lot of business meetings, people just talk, like this one talks, that one talks. It's almost like a competition to see who gets to say something. And I actually feel like people are listening more in meetings, and there's like a patience, and there's listening deeply, not just to answer, but to understand. And I think that's something, in fact, that's something that several other people on the podcast have discussed. And hopefully that'll be one of the things that we come out of COVID, doing and thinking better. So it's been great talking to you. And, I just feel like the thing that you did, that your company did with that COVID-19 data set is just a feat. It's an example of what human beings and organizations can do in a time of crisis to, make a big difference all of a sudden. That wasn't your business model, but you just went out and did it. And it served a lot of companies, a lot of organizations. And I think it probably saved lives. So that's not something that every business can say. And I think it's just very inspirational that you guys did that.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Snowflake, the data cloud company. Inside the data cloud, organizations unite their siloed data, discover and securely share data, and execute diverse analytic workloads across multiple clouds. Learn more at snowflake.com/podcast.